Greetings, everyone. This is our second reading for Best Small Fictions, and I'm considering this a kind of a launch, a second launch. This is the DC-oriented launch, or the DMV area. This is for Best Small Fictions, the 2021 anthology. You can see the cover here, and really, I think I'm really pleased with the way it turned out, and hopefully you all are as well. And we have a slate of wonderful authors to share their work this evening with us, and maybe a few words about what perhaps inspired them to write a particular piece as well. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for attending and for participating and sharing their work. It's really a wonderful anthology, and of course, myself and the staff go through thousands and thousands of pieces, so you should really feel proud of yourself for being included, because it's not easy. Let me tell you that. It's not easy to become included in this particular anthology. It's a very extensive project. We read from basically November to February, and it's just, something that I put a lot of time and energy behind. So I'm just really thrilled to have you all share your work with us. So before we get to the actual work itself, I'd like to introduce Rian Amilcar-Scott, who will say a few words about the guest editing part that he did, and say a few words about the anthology. So let me turn it over to Rian.
Hey everybody! I wish we were all together. I was looking forward to it. I was excited about getting out the house, but it's like the Godfather. Every time we think we're out, we get pulled back in. I when I remember, I don't remember reading most of the stories, I don't remember reading most of the stories when I was doing my work on this anthology. They're saying they can't see me. You're not missing anything. Can you see me now? Yeah, so I don't remember reading most of these stories. I think the pandemic has done a lot of strange things to our brain. I think they still saying there. You can't see me. I'm gonna keep talking. You're not missing anything. The pandemic has done a lot of strange things to our brain. One thing I do remember though is that there was a certain point early in the pandemic where reading, and I talk about this in the introduction. Reading is this thing that I love, and throughout my entire life has always been there for me, and it's and then suddenly the world was upside down, and I'm looking at words and they're not making any sense to me. And it was just this strange feeling of having to work so much harder to make meaning. Reading wasn't a pleasure. It wasn't a joy, because it felt like it's something I couldn't do. And so then I'm tasked with doing this thing where it's just a lot of reading. Looking at these stories and finding such stories that were exciting, and were a pleasure, and were doing such interesting things, really brought me back. It was one of those things that really brought me back. I had to work very hard and read sentences, a piece at a time, a sentence at a time. But it brought back that excitement, brought me back to this thing that I absolutely love doing, independent of writing. So I want to thank you guys for that. Those of you who are a part of this anthology. It sort of reinforced to me what stories do for us. They really, they really bring, at least for me, it really brings me into this world. I don't know when we're gonna be out of this, but at least we have stories to help us through. So can't wait to hear them out loud. So I'm gonna step out the way so that we can we can move forward and get to the more exciting parts. But again, I want to thank you guys for doing that for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Rian, for your thoughts and for sharing your ideas there and your insights. I mean, a lot of really great insights, especially about the community aspect of everything that is involved with an anthology like this. I mean, I feel the same way. I also noticed that this particular anthology has kind of a dark undertone to it, and I'm like, someone pointed that out during the last reading, and I thought, yeah, I can see why. We have a lot going on in our world, especially in 2021, in 2020. So it's not a surprise. Okay, so let's get to the work and to the authors in the anthology. So first up, I'm going to kind of shift to gallery so I can hopefully pin Tara up correctly. First up is Tara Campbell, who is a writer, teacher, Kimball Fellow, and fiction co-editor at Barrel House. She received her MFA from American University. Previous publication credits include Smoke Lawn Quarterly, Masters Review, Wigleaf, and many others. So please give a warm welcome to Tara Campbell.
Hello all. I can see myself. Great. So yes, we're functioning now. The authors were given an opportunity to talk about our inspiration, and I will be honest, I can't quite remember what inspired this particular story, but it must have been a class prompt, because usually I am sweating over plot. And this particular story is focused on a moment and on sensation. So somebody must have gotten me out of my rut and enabled me to write this micro called The Greatest Show. We climbed down from our platforms and out of the ring, inhaling deeply of sawdust and popcorn, sweat and dung. We turned out the lights and broke down the tents, ropes biting into our palms. We watered the elephants and fed the lions. We waved at stragglers and kissed our new lovers goodbye. One last campfire, one last harmonica bray, one last cloud of dust kicked up by our dancing feet. One last paycheck pressed into our hands. No train tomorrow, no makeup, no spangled costumes. We'll tip our heads back, way back, and spread our arms for the fall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara. That was wonderful. Okay, you guys can see me okay?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure I'm doing this correctly. So next up we have Pat Ferran. And Pat Ferran is a writer from who lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His work has appeared in Wigleaf, Tahoma Literary Review, Best Microfiction 2021, and many other places. Please welcome Pat.
Thank you so much, Nathan, Rian, and the Best Small Fictions team for including a flash CNF piece in this edition. I'm so grateful to you for that. It was written 6 months before my son Corey died of complications from muscular dystrophy. It's called Tilt.
Hold on one second, Pat. Let me make sure people can see you.
Ain't missing much.
Can you guys see Pat now or no? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Should I go?
Yes.
Okay. It's called Tilt. Can you put me on tilt? My leaning son asks. He can't help this leaning, even though he's seatbelted and secure in this wheelchair he's been sitting in, living and declining in the past dozen years. He can't grip the chair's controls. He can't control his grip. He doesn't have a grip, not anymore. His muscles are wasting away. He's losing strength. He needs someone to put the chair back. He needs someone to put him on tilt. Tilting relieves the pressure on his neck, his spine, his back, his butt. He's got no my son who's wasting away. Tilt makes me dizzy, but it's better sometimes, he says. So I put him on tilt and he's okay for a moment. Suspended, he's at peace, or looks like he is. Like the dream is over, like the worst is past, like a decision's been made. I make a joke like I do. It's a joke he usually laughs at. It's a thing we do, the two of us, a thing we have, the two of us. But he doesn't laugh at this joke. He doesn't smile. He doesn't respond. Not while he's on tilt. And I feel this flash, this bolt. It's more like a shiver, the dream that ended, the worst that's over, the decision made. He's giving up, I think. And I have no reason to think this, no reason, not really, not now, not yet. Where's this coming from? So I bite my tongue or my lip or my left arm, or is it shame I chomp down on? I chomp down on it hard, as in hard without holstering. But it is here in this moment, with trapdoors and trapezes, among horsemen and hangmen, that I know what I know, that I'm not what I thought, that I'm not what I believed, that I'm not what I hoped. This kid who doesn't complain never about pain, not once, not ever. This young man of a kid who never feels sorry for himself, not once, not ever. This darling young one, the strongest one I know. The one I lean on his strength. He takes a moment for himself. He takes a moment to regroup. He goes on tilt and he found him some peace. Yet here I shiver and I simper and I dizzily posit if-thens. If he's giving up, how am I going to lean on him? Lean on his strength? If I can't lean on his strength, how am I going to be strong enough to be there for him? I mean, he's tilting. I mean, how can you lean on a guy who's tilting? I mean, he'll fall. I don't understand what I'm positing. I don't understand what I'm saying to myself, but I fear the worst, a worst that's not over, a weak moment that isn't a moment, but a river of them, a river that says uncle, a river that says quitting time, a mirror of a river that says look hard, look real hard. Whose face do you see? I look at my tilting son's face, that darling young face. He looks so peaceful. I mean, peace like a real river. And I remember something he'd say after I'd tell a joke he didn't get. Why do I have to understand what you're saying all the time? He'd say. And I hear that river, the peaceful one, the river that turns tables on unsuspecting levees, the one that turns cartwheels at crunch time. Can you put me on tilt? I say to my son. Are you just kidding? He asks. I don't know, I say. And I picture a pinball heart riding shotgun on the peaceful river, the one that's leaning, the one that's lurching, the one that's letting go. I'll try, I say, in words neither one of us understands. Thanks.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Pat.
Thanks for having me.
Love the comments in chat, and guys, feel free to throw up your ideas here in chat, your applause, your kudos, all that good stuff. All right, next up we have Christy Hallberg, who will read Aperture from Fiction Southeast. Christy Hallberg teaches literature and writing at East Carolina University and serves as senior associate editor of North Carolina Literary Review. She is the author of the novel Searching for Jimmy Page, forthcoming, actually out now, from Livingston Press. And her short fiction, creative nonfiction, book reviews, and interviews have appeared in many journals. Please welcome Christy Hallberg.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great, okay. Like a lot of people, George Floyd's murder really affected me. So I think that's really all I need to say about that. That really influenced the writing of this piece there called Aperture. I photographed them in black and white, never color. Color alters context, I tell their grieving families, friends, lovers. Like illusion, a sleight of hand, a figment of my artist's imagination. I want to make them real, candid, hidden truths exposed, my lens wide open. Mine is an anachronistic art, photographing the dead. The Victorian age, when such a somber practice was in vogue, itself long dead. I have no business cards or social media presence, no brick and mortar studio with anodyne decor and anemic backdrops, funereal blackout curtains adding insult to injury and illness. My services are advertised by word of mouth in my hometown, a Bible-choked southern hamlet from which I never escaped, like most of my subjects. I come to them when I am called, racing rigor mortis for pliable limbs and tractable faces to capture them frame by frame through monochrome viewing filters, hues and tints excised like tumors, essence if non-existence restored. I have perched ashen infants swaddled in christening blankets in the arms of wailing mothers with eyes deep as the grave, arranged beloved dolls at the feet of an emaciated young woman strapped in a bentwood rocker, Kaposi sarcoma lesion on her neck marking her like a scarlet letter, propped a scowling teenager against his saturnine sister, whose middle finger covered the bullet hole in his temple, nabbed a young widower sprawled beside his seraphic wife on their marriage bed, her face veiled in white lace and lilacs, his hand covering her missing breast as if it were a placeholder. I have documented my own mother, the photograph like a painting, a Zazan peasant woman enveloped in darkness, clutching her prayer beads as if they were an antidote for despair, head bowed, eyes open, downcast, submissive, the barren white walls as desolate as she. Hers were the secrets I most wanted to reveal. Her crippling Catholic guilt as grotesque as a Flannery O'Connor tale for the black baby her white womb had expelled, silent and breathless, and the lover she'd sacrificed to a posse's noose to assuage her family's white rage in the days of separate but equal. Her father, or perhaps her brother, had photographed the broken body dangling from an oak tree like a piece of Billie Holiday's strange fruit, a verse from Hebrews written on the back of the sepia snapshot in her father's imperious hand. Vengeance belongeth to me, and I will repay. She'd kept it, even after she'd fled the house of the father and son, buried it in a box in a closet beneath years of aftermath and artifice, this holy image, forsaken and alone. Her death was the will of the pandemic spring, another breathless black body like her lover named George, captured on film, stoking her guilt, her sacred photograph, exhumed, cradled in her supplicating hands, both past and prologue. I wish I could peel back the layers of resin and polyethylene, strip his image bare of pain and paradox, set him free. Thanks.
That was wonderful, Christy. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Just as a little interlude, I wanted to say how proud I am of all of the DC area writers in this particular anthology. When I logged on early, a few writers and I were talking and just saying that it's sort of interesting how many DC, Baltimore, Northern Virginia writers who seem to be included in this anthology. And of course, when the pieces are accepted, we don't know exactly where everyone is from, but it's just a real delight as someone who lives in Northern Virginia. Of course, not everyone today here has a DC connection. I invited a few folks from the hinterlands, so to speak, but it is nice to see such representation. Okay, next up, we have Bill Ratner. Bill Ratner is a Poets and Writers Readings and Workshops grant recipient. His poems and essays are published in Chiron Review, Baltimore Review, Rattle Magazine, and many others. Bill will be sharing his piece, Quarantine Ride, from the Queen's Quarterly. Please welcome Bill Ratner.
Thanks, Nathan. And thanks to Rian and Michelle Alvey and Claire Guyton for putting together a really beautiful volume, which I've been having, just listening to Pat's piece and reading along and Christie's piece is just a pleasure. And so I'm quickly flicking through table of contents as soon as you say the names of the poets. This is a piece that I wrote in the summer of 2020 before we had a vaccine and there was a lot of fear and fantasy. It's called Quarantine Ride. I want a limo for this, a huge stretch limo like the one Sinatra rode in, longer than a semi. I'll stick my head out the sunroof and breathe and sneeze from the pollen and smell Tommy's chili cheeseburgers and kimchi on 6th Street, deep fried Snickers at the LA County Fair, runner's sweat, fresh rubber on racing bikes at the Venice Pier, fried catfish and brine, all in the air. I'll tap my lips so I know I'm there, massage my jaws, ball up my hand and thump my thymus where the second button of my shirt touches my sternum and leave this morning's slog dream behind. I'll rise like a pudgy bodhisattva levitating over his cushion. I'll ignore the placards of grief. I won't acknowledge death. I'll test my fear. I'll take vitamin C, maybe a whole gram a day. I'll float like a kite blown so high you'll see yogis performing asanas on the mountaintop. At 8 o'clock, it'll still be light out. I'll hear the sound of drums and whistles, incantations, grateful cries from people's windows. I'll finger the air and float back and forth in a sky blue sack like a Malibu seal. Sirens will go off in the desert for a sale at Costco. I'll buy Dexatrim and an apple-scented room freshener, grab free paper cups of sharp cheddar cubes and soy drinks. I won't be able to sleep. I'll go take in the poppies. We'll park right by sidewalks full of people in shorts and smiles, kids eating dreamsicles, laughs echoing through the crowd. I want all this in one huge breath. Driver, don't drop me off yet. Go around real slow one more time for one more look, one more breath, so I can remember.
Bill, that was great. Thank you so much. I agree with the comments on chat that, you know, if I need an audiobook reader, Bill, I'm calling you.
I'm available, believe me.
Okay. Excellent. Next up, we have Jessie Rothwell. And Jessie Rothwell is a writer, storyteller, composer, singer, teacher, and concert curator. Her writing has appeared in the Rumpus, Barrel House, and the Grace and Gravity Journal series, and many others. Jessie will read her piece, Salvation by the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, published in Furious Gravity. Please welcome Jessie Rothwell.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for including me in this amazing anthology. And hi, Tara. And I have to give a shout out to Lisa Gaeta because I love seeing you here, Lisa. And Lisa knew me when I lived in Los Angeles. I now live in Washington, D.C. area. But this piece that I'm about to read is part of a collection that I'm working on about songs that influenced, that basically were snapshots of moments in LA when I lived in LA and I was homeless. So this is like Pat said, I really appreciate the include based on the fact that this is actually creative nonfiction. Salvation by Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. You're sitting in your car on the crest of a hill in Hollywood that overlooks the neighborhood below, the 101 freeway running through it, and beyond that, downtown Los Angeles. It's sunrise and you've only slept a couple of hours in your car a few blocks away from here on a narrow shaded street that doesn't have street lamps nearby. So it was really dark at midnight or so when you drove up there to set up your sleeping bag in the back seat and try to rest and put the image of bed bugs out of your head. You were sleeping at a motel when you think you saw evidence and felt evidence of bed bugs. So you checked out of the motel and called a guy you'd been sort of loosely dating around that time. And of course he didn't want you to come over because maybe now you had bed bugs in your stuff. You should have known not to call him because of course he wouldn't want you to come over. You were never close with him and you knew better than to expect anything from him, but you were so panicked and desperate, you called him anyway. When you hung up, you debated going to another hotel, but you knew you shouldn't do that because of money. So you did what you had to do and drove to a spot where you could sleep in your car. Though if you'd known at the time about Korean jjimjilbangs being open 24 hours, you would have gone and paid $15 to enter one of those. And then you could have slept on a mat on a heated floor. As soon as you know you're going to sleep in your car, you know where you're going. To the street around the corner from your old apartment in Hollywood, at the base of the hills that surround the famous sign. It's a safe neighborhood, relatively speaking, even though your car once got broken into in the 6 years you lived there. So you get to the block and it's springtime, so there's vegetation around, because actually there's vegetation around all the time in Los Angeles. And you get out of the car and get into the back seat and you can smell the jasmine so sweet and sharp in the nighttime coolness. And there are palm trees and other greens hanging down close to the car, and it feels oddly like you're in paradise. And it's such a disjointed feeling. Here you are, actually homeless with nowhere else to go at almost 1 a.m. So you get in your sleeping bag out, you get your sleeping bag out of the trunk where it always is, because your car is loaded with almost everything you might need in any given situation, water and granola bars in case of an earthquake. Because let's face it, it's more likely that you'll be in your car than anywhere else when the shit hits the fan. You take off all extra clothing once you're in the back seat, get rid of your jeans, and again, try to get the picture of bugs infesting everything you own out of your head. And you crunch up in something like the fetal position on your back seat, but the seat isn't even. There are indentations in the two end seats, and the middle seat is higher. So in 10 minutes, you're already uncomfortable and restless. And as you are shifting around, you hear car doors, and then laughing outside.
Jesse, hold on. You got muted somehow. We missed the last couple of sentences.
Sorry, don't know how that happened. There are indentations in the two end seats and the middle seat is higher. So in 10 minutes, you're already uncomfortable and restless. And as you are shifting around, you hear car doors and then voices laughing and talking outside. And you see people walking from a car to their house right next to where you've parked. And you pray they don't notice you, but of course they don't, because everything is dark. At some point, finally, the world gets blurry and fades. And then it seems like a few minutes passed, but was probably a couple of hours. And you're awake, listening to so many birds, such a loud refrain. And you try to identify some of the bird calls, hoping that will lull you back to sleep. And it probably would if you weren't so stiff and uncomfortable from the back seat. So you decide to move and you pull yourself up and you put on clothes, and you're not sure what time it is, but it's before dawn. So you realize you can't go to the laundromat quite yet, which is the first place you're heading. So you can hopefully get rid of any possible bug infestation. You get back in the driver's seat and the air is lovely and fragrant and the world is so still, and you start driving again. And instead of going the old route by your old apartment, you turn so you won't pass it, because you know it would make you too sad if you passed it. So instead, you drive up the hill that you are now perched on, overlooking downtown, and it's getting close to sunrise. So you sit there watching how beautiful the city is right now and listening to Salvation by Black Rebel Motorcycle Club on repeat. Robert Turner is singing Feels Like Nothing's Really Holy, and never has a lyric been more apt for the moment, and the light starts to emerge over downtown because that's the East, and you aren't ready for such beauty, the way the sunlight starts to reflect on the blue lit buildings that cause them to burst into gold leaf. And now Turner is repeating the refrain, do you feel alive? Can you feel alive? Do you feel alive? Can you feel alive? And you wonder.
Jesse, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that piece. Really amazing.
Thank you.
What's fun about the reading process behind Best Small Fictions is, I really have no idea whether something is creative nonfiction, fiction, prose poetry, unless an editor specifically says that. And I don't discriminate on genre, I mean, we read the pieces and whatever's good is good. And Jesse, that was a lovely piece, and thank you for the background. Next up is Maria Stach, who, sorry, let me get to the bio, is a U.S. diplomat serving in Brussels, Belgium. Her stories have been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, anthologized and published in Prairie Schooner, Barely South Review, Gargoyle, and many others. Please welcome Maria.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you. So my piece, Sirens, is actually the opening chapter of my first novel in Stories. And it's about this young mid-20s refugee from Serbia. Okay, so here we go. When the bombs break the earth, it feels like your house is coming down on your head and on your family. And you thought you were so young and had your whole life ahead of you. And the fact that you never left Serbia didn't matter because there was so much time ahead. And the fact that you only studied and dated stupid boys. And all of a sudden, with a pilot's hand movement, with some muscle and joint contraction, with a screech of release and a smell of burnt metal, there is a whistle in the air above your head. And you're taking the rest of your life away, listening to that whistle growing meaner and louder. And the fear is unlike any fear you ever felt before, any fear you ever read about in a book. And you don't even care anymore if God exists or not, if there's heaven or an afterlife or reincarnation. You just want to live. And when your house shakes from foundation to roof, and the crystal chandeliers swing viciously, and the glasses and porcelain break, and your great-grandmother's armoire that stood in the same spot for a century slides toward you, you wonder if you're still alive. And when you feel your heart is fighting to break out of your chest and jump and run and hide, and you're all drenched in sweat and tears, and your mother is pulling her hair out, like in those heroic epic poems you studied in school, and your father is on his knees peering out of a broken window, you realize you are still alive. Then you hear another whistle, Groundhog Day. And even if your sweaty palms are on your ears, you still hear men and women and children screaming in the streets. You hear cats and babies and dogs wailing alike, and cars starting, and somebody swearing at Christopher Columbus, and at somebody's fucking American mother, and at Milosevic's mother, and you hear doors slamming and someone's running. Then the lights go out everywhere, a whole new layer of terror. And then you think if you're still alive, you won't be for much longer. And this must be how the grave looks like from the inside. Then you hear seconds in your head filled with lead like bombs, but they seem like minutes now, and like hours. And suddenly everything silences. And you're thinking, this is it, I'm dead. It wasn't too bad, it didn't hurt too much. Until you hear a siren, but you don't know what it means because When in your 20 years of life did you ever hear a siren? And it's not like they teach sirens in school. And when a neighbor chants curfew over, and his voice is first louder, then fainter, and the lights go on again on the street, then in the house, and you see your mother weeping, and your father grabs your shoulders and asks you, Anna, are you okay? And his hands are bloody, but you can't speak. And your mother hugs you so tight that you can barely breathe. And then she releases you, and you can see her mouth move, but you can't hear her. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maria, thank you so much for sharing that piece. It was really great. I also wanted to mention that Maria's piece came from Gargoyle, which is also one of the spotlighted journals this year. So if you don't have the anthology and are interested in purchasing the anthology, if you turn to the back, we have interviews with editors from we pick sort of like the best journals that year for flash fiction, I guess you would say. And Richard Peabody is interviewed in the back from Gargoyle. So it's really nice to be able to share that as well. Okay, next up, we have Alina Stefanescu, who will read her piece from Midway Journal. And Alina Stefanescu was born in Romania and lives in Birmingham, Alabama with her partner and several intense mammals. Recent books include a creative nonfiction chapbook. Her poetry collection, Door, won the Wandering Ignis Press Prize, and she is also which is also forthcoming, or actually perhaps already out. So please welcome Alina Stefanescu.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Someone nod, okay. So I'm trying to think of how this story started. And I think it was on a break between, I was trying to finish a poetry collection, and I just had this sort of image that was based on a memory, a loose memory. And I was talking to someone about the 90s and about fainting, about this thing called fainting circle. So almost like Bloody Mary, you know how there's these things that people did when we were young that are just so messed up if you think back about them. And then when you have kids, you're like, oh, I hope my kids are not doing these things. Well, that happens to me a lot. So it happened to me, and I wrote a little story about it when I remembered this thing we used to do in grade school. When you sneak out with Kim for a cigarette between SGA and lunch. SGA is student government. Kim seems antsy, aggressive. She asks if you've ever stared at a turtle. You try to remember. The smell of burnt plastic comes from somewhere unseen. Sure, I've stared at a turtle, you say. Hasn't everyone? Kim leans forward on her elbows, drawing her voice close to the hot sidewalk cement, like she's chatting with the heat, urging the warmth upwards. No, I mean, have you ever really, truly stared at a turtle in nature, trying to get back to nature? This is specific. This excludes pet store staring or friends with pet turtles plunked in old fish aquariums. This excludes the number of times you've been high and hallucinated turtles. This excludes the faded turtles on the yellow plastic shower curtain, which hang in your boyfriend, the bassist's bathroom. When Kim narrows the options, you realize that you stared at a turtle once near the mailbox and maybe other times in roadside ditches as well. Kim shakes her head and smiles like she's got you. That's the illusion of turtle. Your eyes followed a tortoise, which is not the same thing. You insist it was a turtle in its shell. Kim repudiates your claim as well as your tone. Fuck insistence, she snaps. You want to know how Kim can be an authority on whether you stared at a turtle or tortoise? Can she see through time? Does she live in your body? I just know you, Kim says. I know you lie. You'd say anything to find common ground with a friend you've been ignoring for weeks. You'd gush over her shitty haircut or say you stared at a turtle and then swear your perfect little life on it. Your perfect little life. It is. Too easy. And then Kim leans her palm on your knee. It is summer. Your skin is a landscape of fire ant bites and rosy mosquito lips. I know you so well, Kim whispers. The feel of her hand is softer than the bassist's, but the pressure she puts on your knee is more relentless, insistent. Let's go, she says, and you follow. You rise from the sidewalk and follow Kim to the vinyl wall behind the gym where janitors sneak their cigarettes in a way that feels familiar. A bike stand serves as a landmark. Somewhere in the cafeteria, the bassist is holding your seat. And you stand with your back to the wall, leaning forward, letting your hair inch across the tips of your leather sandals as Kim counts down from 10, her voice far, hollow. 7, 6. The blood pools in your head, a tender thickening, a known pressure. The bassist is probably wondering. When Kim says 0, you flip your head and flip your head up and press your back against the wall. You hold your breath and close your pumpkin eyes as Kim's hands encircle your neck, the firmness of her palms meeting in a butterfly shape at the center of her throat. She presses hard, cuts off a supply of blood, air, light, sky, flash marks beneath your eyelids, the pulse of blood in your temples, the world of high school blurred, broken. It is comforting to let go, to remember how it felt, how it always feels as it comes off again. The knees weakening, blood leaving your lips, Kim's freesia lotion, grass somehow touching and not touching your body. The worried eyes of the bassist asking where you've been and what happened. I found a turtle outside, he'll say. Then you will touch his cheek and settle into the seat he saved for you. I found a turtle and decided to watch it. Thank you.
Lena, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing that, and also the background behind the piece. That was really wonderful and wonderfully read as well. I always feel weird that I'm the only one clapping. I'm sure you all are clapping, but we can't hear you. So feel free to unmute yourself if you want to do that. It's fine. Okay, next up we have Renee Jessica Tan, who will read her piece Anti-Cheeks from Flash Fiction Online. And Renee's work has appeared in various anthologies and publications, including Flash Fiction Online, Everyday Fiction, 365 Tomorrows. Her short story Baghead was read live at Symphony Space in New York City and featured on the Selected Shorts podcast. How cool is that? So please welcome Renee Jessica Tan.
Hi. You can hear me? Okay. First of all, I just want to say that everybody's stories are so amazing, and I feel really, really honored to be in this collection. And I also want to give a shout out on the participants list. I see a lot of people that I love and I'm excited to read for, and I just want to thank all my friends who are here for showing up and taking the time. So this is my story. It's called Anti-Cheeks. My Auntie Cheeks moved in with us when I was around the age memories start to stick. She brought with her no belongings and made no requests except one. "Put me there," she said, pointing the yellow nail of her forefinger to underneath the kitchen sink. Fortunately for her, the sink was relatively large for such a small apartment. Auntie Cheeks tucked herself neatly into the cabinet, bent knees on either side of the drain pipe, neck crooked below the cracked porcelain undercarriage of the basin. She was flexible and petite, her skeleton thin as pins, and every joint seemed to rotate 180 degrees. "It's perfect," she smiled. She had caves in her grin, and the teeth she managed to hang on to were more marrow than bone. Within weeks, The dankness turned her brown, leathery skin into gray sheets of parchment, but she didn't seem to mind. Best room in the house, she'd say, laughing with her cloudy black eyes. Back then, any woman with white hair was an auntie, but no one could tell me how we were related. My dad said she came from my mom's side, and my mom said she came from my dad's. My parents rarely agreed about anything. But Auntie Cheeks didn't look like anyone in my family. I asked her once if we were really related. She snapped, "Of course we are. I looked exactly like you when I was your age." I didn't believe her. No one that old was ever my age. I spent many afternoons bare-stomached on the dirty linoleum playing with Auntie Cheeks. I'd scratch on the cabinet door like a cat. She would immediately push it open and say something like, "Did you bring me any marshmallows?" I always tried to have something sweet for her, even if it was just 2 cubes of sugar or a packet of ketchup from the fast food restaurant down the street. Auntie Cheeks made me taste everything before giving it to her. "To prove you're not poisoning me," she'd say. But my offerings were so small, I ended up eating the whole thing myself. Even when I managed to procure a bigger treat, say a Twinkie or a popsicle, Auntie Cheeks still never seemed to get her share. I asked Auntie Cheeks what she did while I was at school. She said she spent the day massaging her face. That's how she stayed looking so young. I asked her to massage my face just to see how it felt. She twisted forward and threaded one arm through the U-shaped drain pipe like elbows entwined in a lover's toast. She put her cold hands on the sides of my face. Her fingers, like the rest of her, were short and narrow. Intense pinpoints of pain bored into my temples, piercing the middle of my eyebrows and pinching underneath my jaw. "See, it keeps you young," she said, tearing at my flesh with satisfaction and humming a happy tune. Auntie Cheeks liked to sing, especially when my parents were fighting in the other room. Whenever my parents started to scream at each other, my Auntie Cheeks would pick up my feet and sing as she cracked the knuckles on my toes to her own special rhythm. Sometimes I joined in, but never loud enough for my parents to hear over the sound of their own shouting. I only eavesdropped when they argued about Auntie Cheeks. Once I heard my mother say something about wanting to be able to keep the Clorox under the sink like normal people. And my dad often complained that he was sick of living with 3 crazy women. One day after school, I brought Auntie Cheeks a piece of chocolate I found in a heart-shaped tin on the floor of my dad's station wagon. It was more bitter than the chocolate I pocketed from the bins at the supermarket. My mother found the tin on the kitchen counter and asked me where it came from. When I told her, my mother's eyes pinched. She said, "Why are you bringing garbage into this house?" I told her it was because Auntie Cheeks was hungry. My mother said, "Auntie Cheeks can starve for all I care." The cabinet was closed, but I knew my Auntie Cheeks heard her. I stood in front of the sink. My mother grabbed the tin, ran to my parents' bedroom, and slammed the door. I heard my mom yelling into the phone. Auntie Cheeks popped open the cupboard door and said, "How about a song?" After that day, every night when I went to bed, my mother would say that Auntie Cheeks might not be there in the morning. I'd cry myself to sleep, trying to figure out where Auntie Cheeks and I would go if my parents kicked her out. But my Auntie Cheeks was always there the next day, asking for a squirt of syrup or an orange soda or a spoonful of pistachio ice cream. My Auntie Cheeks was still under the sink when my dad finally left. When I told her that my mother and I had to go live with my grandparents, I promised to take her with me. "Can I live under their sink?" she asked. The cabinets in my grandparents' house were filled with pills and herbs and slimy jars with labels I couldn't read. I said Auntie Cheeks could probably stay under the pull-out bed my mom and I would share in the living room. No, I like it here," she said. "I think I'll stay." My eyes and nose started to leak. My Auntie Cheeks wiped my face with her strong hands. "Go and give your grandma a good face massage. It'll keep her young." The morning we left our apartment, I scratched at the cupboard like I always did. Auntie Cheeks didn't push the door open. I put 2 heart-shaped candies on the linoleum. One said, "You are sweet," and the other one said, "Dream on." Thank you.
That was great. Okay, we only have 2 more readers left. So before we get to Elizabeth and Hanana, I would like to just make a couple of quick announcements before I forget to do so. And while I still have your attention. So first of all, thank you guys so much for doing this. This has been really a great reading. I will post the recording on the Facebook page when I have it all set up. Hopefully I don't mess it up. Let's see, February 5th, February 6th, we have 2 readings, double header, both hosted by Assistant Editor Michelle Elvey, both 6 p.m. I posted the invites on our Facebook page, but I'm happy to send it out to you through email, and I will do that. Just to remind you, we have 2 more groups of authors sharing their work on February 5th, February 6th. That's a Friday and a Saturday. And then March 3rd, we have our very last kind of full reading, another virtual reading. This one hosted by Elna Styler, who from Sunder Press, and she will host that one. And I think it's 7 p.m. So stay tuned for that. The last thing I wanted to mention is a new thing, which some of you all may have seen in an email from me. There will be a craft chat towards the end of March, which will include several authors from Best Small Fictions, and it will be kind of more nuts and bolts and really investigating sort of the craft of flash fiction and the craft of of writing in general. Okay, so let's dive into the last 2 pieces. Elizabeth Turner will share her piece, great title, Horse Mouth and Aquarium Head from Lost Balloon. And Elizabeth Turner's work has been published in Cutbank, Fairy Tale Review, Gulf Coast, Lost Balloon, and many others. So please welcome Elizabeth Turner.
Hello. To Rihanna, Nathan, and Sonder Press and Lost Balloon. Putting this out there. This is also actually inspired by, I lived in LA for 6 years, and I had this bench that I used to go up to in Elysian Park a lot. Also, I've always been pretty into fairy tales, which kind of play a part in this. So anyway, horse mouth and aquarium head. The woman with the horse mouth sighs. She tries delicately, but with that mouth, whatever comes out is a snort. Her gait is even rather equine. Her head posts up and down as she strides. She is waiting for the man with the aquarium head. No further instructions other than, you'll know him when you see him. And if he's been given any instructions about her, they'd be the same. She doesn't know what an aquarium head will look like. Rectangular with attachments, like the treasure chest at the bottom of many tanks. But when he finally arrives, she knows. His head is green tinted glass, like something found on the beach, and beautiful. He's filled with water weeds, wavy grasses, fish darting about, and behind all that was a pair of moony human eyes. She whinnies, trying to portray a sense of recognition and excitement, but she knows that all he probably sees are her yellowing teeth. He takes her hand and leads her away. I am walking down the street with a man with an aquarium head, she thinks, and then wonders how he breathes. When he turns his head to look for cars, she sees the gills pinkly flapping behind his ears. She blushes above her horsey snout and shoves a sugar cube into her mouth. She wonders how he eats and where they are going. The man with the aquarium head takes them up a hill and down another to a bench overlooking the city. Smog curls around the middles of buildings like tutus. She is sweating a little and bends to drink from a hose placed to fill a can. Then he hands her a book, Spells to Counteract. He pats the seat next to him. On a small pad of paper, he writes, "How did it happen to you?" and pushes it towards her. The woman with the horse mouth ruffles the pages, sighs again, and dollops them with greenish spit. Work, jealousy, she writes. I dated the boss. I didn't know there were witches there. The man with the aquarium head nods and writes again. Everyone was a witch? No, she scrawls. Just two, a man and a woman. We had a company performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Bubbles pop at the top of his head as he starts to laugh. The woman with the horse mouth begins to laugh too. She whinnies and snorts. They didn't even get the right animal. The man with the aquarium head reaches into a pocket and pulls out a canister. He shakes it at his new friend. Standing up, she unlatches the top of his head, and the greenish glass sparkles in the sun. She sprinkles in flakes of food. The bench is in the shade, and the city buzzes in the late afternoon. She knows just when to stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was great. Thank you guys so much for being so, relaxed and understanding about moving this reading virtually. It would have been really lovely to have met you at Epicure Cafe and to hang out and so forth, but this turned out to be just as nice, and hopefully it lasts forever on the internet. So last but not least, we have Lovebird by Hanana Zahir from Pithead Chapel. And Hanana Zahir is the author of Lovebirds, a flash chapbook from Bull City Press, published last year. Other writing has recently appeared in places such as Agony, Smoke Long, Virginia Quarterly Review, McSweeney's, and many other places. So please welcome Hanana Zahir.
Thank you so much. I will echo what's been said before. It's been such an amazing evening or afternoon rather of stories, and I'm so honored to be a part of this group. And thank you also for the space to read. It's always exciting these days to be able to share stories, especially because of Zoom. I feel like it's made it so much easier. So this story, which is actually the title story for my flash collection, as you mentioned, I think that the Best Small Fictions is entirely dark, and I'm afraid I have done my part to add to that darkness. But I will argue darkness is always more exciting than light. So here we go. None of her children have shown up for her birthday, and Soraya sits at the window watching the empty driveway, upright in the walnut wood chair that her father had ordered from the most expensive retailer in Lahore for her wedding. What was it, 50 years ago? And ignores the hard-boiled egg and the orange and the glass of pomegranate juice on the tray in front of her. Same tray she had used to carry soup and water to her mother. She can't even remember how long ago, she thinks, feeling the burn from the heater on her small feet, and reaches for the single lovebird in the cage beside her. The silver coupe her husband gave her on their 20th anniversary, complete with the blue bird and that sparkle in his eyes and a happy anniversary, darling, even though it was the same year that she had lost her mother, and happy was the farthest thing from her mind. But he had been feeling guilty, turned out, about the new secret wife, and the affections had become louder and more elaborate until all three kids had learned to say they wanted a love like their parents. And Amma, aren't you lucky? And her heart had fluttered at the sight of those delicate bird feet tumbling on the perch, though later she had wondered if she really was lucky, because that bird died in December, and soon after it, her father was gone too. And then her marriage, when the letter from the husband's new wife arrived, which even now is pressed into her old teaching copy of Sense and Sensibility on the bookshelf behind her, and which she kept after all the death, so that every time she stood in front of a classroom of eager girls, she could be reminded never to forgive her husband, and to restrain the chirps of silly girls' hearts by telling them everything died at its most beautiful, and it was best to believe only the words that slice the heart. Truth was never meant to be kind. And now when her eyes spot the little blue edge that sticks out from between the pages, she holds the bird's neck gently between her knuckles and rubs her thumb against the red patch on its head, nearly as soft as the hair on her daughters' heads when they were little, before they layered on hair color and rebellion and shaved and cut and changed entirely how they looked in an effort, she feels still, to rid themselves of her. And she was left with her son, the only one who had remained loyal, that sweet thing sitting quietly by her bed day after her husband moved out, and who had wanted to give her his pocket money then, thinking it was the anniversary bird dying that made her cry and wrap her blanket around her as if she was building herself a cocoon. And who, though he comes to see her less and less, pays for her to keep her house now, and who is across the city somewhere with the woman he has come to love more, just like his father. He was meant to sit in the chair beside her today, a good boy, looking out the window as she told him about all the dreams she had when she was a child, how she had wanted to train birds to deliver letters when she was young, how she wished her mother had warned her about endings, how she had given up the habit of looking forward and abandoned her yearly walk to the kitchen to hang the scenes of Northern Pakistan calendar the maid and the cook so seemed to like, and asked if he could find her a new one for them. Would he do that for her? And thinking of his absence, slowly her knuckles squeeze the small neck between them, and with her other hand, she holds the wings flapping strong and getting stronger. She knows they will be the strongest right before the end, until the claws scratching at her lap start to fail, and she tells herself, this is just how life goes, Soraya, this is just how it is, and stares out the window. It is Tuesday, no Wednesday, perhaps even Thursday. Tomorrow, she will break off another small piece of gold from her wedding bracelets and ask the girl who brings her food to her to go to the market and buy another bird. Thank you.
What an ending. That's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and for sharing, authors. That was really great. I really learned a lot about each piece as I heard it read out loud and performed by the authors. Any questions? I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes on Zoom and chat with you guys. But otherwise, we'll just kind of wrap up, and hopefully I see some folks in February at Michelle Alvey's hosted readings. And again, thanks again for what a terrific reading and turnout. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. This is awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Great reading.
Thanks. This was really, really fun.
It was fun.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
It
Great
was
piece.
It was really awesome. I wish we could have been in person, but this was so great.
I know. By the way, I love Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. So I
Yeah.
think that hooked me with the title, and then it just liked the piece even more.
Oh, thanks.
So that was cool.
Yeah, what a great La La Land story.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that this whole compilation that this whole group of songs that I'm gonna be doing is gonna come out on its own. But thank you. And I'm so glad that it was cool that it was creative nonfiction instead of.
Oh yeah. Well, it's splitting hairs to some degree.
That's the thing is that, like, I agree, and obviously, it's not like it's the other way where it was pretending to be nonfiction when it was fiction. So
your editor nominated the piece, and whatever's nominated to me, I consider it, and everyone else loved it too. So it was great. If you had not told me that, I wouldn't. I'm not sure I would have known. It did have a personal feel to it, but so do a lot of short stories. So do a lot.
Yeah, and it was interesting that there were 3 in a row. Me and then the 2 people after me were all second person, and I love second person, and sometimes to me, second person really feels like nonfiction, you know?